we had a really interesting feedback, and if the listener sent this is listening now, we really appreciate it. And basically, the feedback went like this: it was concerned about AI taking human jobs. It's a very legitimate concern, makes sense to me. And so the proposal was that, hey, if you're going to have a company and you're going to use AI to replace humans, you should have to pay a premium for that. Now, this commenter didn't specify, but I assume somehow the government would extract this or there'd be some sort of regulation. So in other words, David, if I decided to get an AI host to co-host this with me and I fired you, then I would have to pay a premium of 5x what I would pay you to host this. And that would be the penalty. And so in other words, there'd be a sort of regulatory structure that would penalize companies for replacing humans with AI, so that AI would indeed be more expensive because of a tax burden or something like that. So first of all, thoughtful comment, appreciated it. And we responded. And so we posted the response. And there's some nuance here that we're not going to be able to completely get because we didn't actually talk to the person that posted it. So less about that particular comment. But I was intrigued by this idea that there would be a regulatory or even an option to reject a technological innovation. Now, first of all, I think from a sheerly political standpoint, it's probably impossible in at least Western democracies currently. I don't really see a mechanism that would allow the kind of regulatory overstructure that would allow that kind of thing to happen, setting aside whether it's desirable or not. But the bigger question here I thought was interesting was, is there a point where you reject technological development? And I think humans have been here before, right? Is there a point where we reject nuclear energy because of the implications for problems? Is there a point where we reject biological research because of the possibilities of creating a super virus? Is there a point where we reject and insert whatever it is? And in general, the human answer has been no, even when the answer probably should be yes. So there's an aspect here, once the genie's out of the bottle, it's impossible to put back in. But I was interesting to think about, like, even if you could put it back in, is it a desirable thing to do so? So anyway, I don't have conclusions to it, but I've been thinking about, is there any, I couldn't think of any historical examples where technological innovation has been stifled and that has ultimately been good without significant unintended consequences that ended up being worse than the actual cure. So I don't know, David, do you have thoughts about that or any perspective there?
Yeah, I can't think of any examples of that either. But I think just what comes to my mind when we think about just the pros and cons of how we should look to respond to technological advancements is that for our listeners' reference, I think that Jonathan and I both can pretty readily acknowledge that we tend to be much more in like advocates for a free market system in most areas, where for most situations in a lot of the business world, if you just allow for the market to correct itself, then in at least a good number of cases, then it can end up being a lot better than governmental reach trying to correct instead of the market finding solutions for itself. But yeah, I think it's just interesting when we consider this in the context of artificial intelligence and just especially in the taking of jobs, because the technology replacing jobs has always been a concern, pretty much for the entirety of human existence, really, as long as there has been societies that have jobs, and so what I think,
at least from the Industrial Revolution. I mean, lots of questions about that, right? So,
that's even that's one of the earlier examples of it. But I think that you could probably even go back further to more ancient civilization times, and you could probably find some very primitive examples of it with just some of the advancements that were made, like, for example, in the Roman Empire, and how when they would conquer a new area and they would implement Roman infrastructure, then sometimes there would be tradesmen who, once Roman infrastructure came along, were put out of business. And so, yeah, this has been a reality for a very long time. We're just seeing this in a very different way. And I think there's just a lot of uncertainty because we're not entirely sure what it's going to look like and how real of a risk it is for artificial intelligence to be able to take the place of what humans do, because it's a lot of what we're seeing advancements in AI is creative. And that's something that we have always viewed as innately human and should be something that we value above many other aspects of society as being a human thing, is that creativity is a celebration of what makes us us. And so much of creativity is an identity expression. And so then if you have just an artificial system that is being used to create what we have so corely identified with as a human expression, then that just, it really hits a chord, I think, with so much of how we have understood art and our identity and how we approach it, that it really makes us question some of this. And so I think that, especially with what we talked about earlier in the show, with how much human creativity and human input is still needed to make artificial intelligence work. Long story short, I don't have a good answer to the question either. I'm in the same boat with you. I'm just processing through this out loud at the same time as you are. But I think that ultimately the best thing that we can do, at least that I know to do, is to just be aware of how these things are progressing, and just look for ways that it can create opportunities for you to be able to express yourself using these tools. Because I think we've talked about several times on this show that you have this AI can create so many opportunities to do new and cool things that weren't possible before.
And here's where we might enter a plea that maybe it's always important, but in some ways it becomes more intensely important as technology advances, is that it's going to be absolutely essential that you understand why you're human. Mm-hmm. And so this is an interesting thing, that as technology advances, that which is not technology and that which is not science. So philosophy. So there are people that would say philosophy and science are sort of opposite ends of things, and that's a whole different discussion. But I would say that philosophical, metaphysical realities become intensely more important as technology advances. And what I mean by that, to kind of strip out some of the academic jargon there, is to say that it's absolutely essential for you to understand why you're human and what your purpose as a human is, in order for you to rightly order your life around new technology. And maybe we'll just close this with an interesting example. So David and I's day job is not Alternative Ideas podcast, but is instead running an education company called Unbound. And so an education company has all kinds of opportunities for AI to come in and replace things. And so let me give you two examples of, like, if you know what you're human, what you would and wouldn't use AI for. So one example would be that we divide students into teams. We do live events, and then we also have online components. And our students are in teams, and they're led by an Ascend team leader. Our program is called Ascend. And so we have ATLs, Ascend team leaders, who are in charge of these teams, and they answer questions about how to move through the program, and they guide students and all those kinds of things. Well, it is not difficult for me to think that we could purchase some sort of AI product probably now, feed it the content that it needs, enter it into our chat rooms, and basically all of our students would be able to get all their questions answered in a fairly quick fashion anytime, day or night, from an AI ATL. But when we consider about what education is for and what it means to be human and the value of relationships and the essential ability to have good relationships, we can see that's a totally untenable and ridiculous idea. That the ATLs in our program, our Ascend team leaders, are absolutely critical for our program because of the relational capital they build with the students, because of the one-on-one relationships that far exceeds just answering questions, which they probably spend most of their time doing, but that's actually less important than the relational, the actual human relationship that they're building with our students. And without that, our program not only wouldn't look the way it does, it probably wouldn't be very successful. And so we would say, hey, in terms of our understanding and our faith understanding of what it means to be human and what humans are for, this would be a ridiculous application of technology, and it would destroy the very thing that we're trying to do. But let me flip to another example. And that example would be, we do live events, and some of those live events, we purchase tickets for our students to attend, plane tickets. And that is a big logistical deal. If you're talking about flying several hundred kids around the country from all kinds of different points of the country to all get someplace. And so there's a cap on how much we can do there, because we have to hire people to actually do all those logistics and buy those tickets. But there's a catch-22 from a business perspective, right? At a certain scale point, I have to hire extra people to work 8 hours a day for weeks on end just to book tickets. But I only have to hire them for a short period of time. But that adds expense, and I have to pass that expense on somewhere, right? And so now all of a sudden, my program becomes priced out of competition. It's more expensive than it's worth, because I had to pay a bunch of extra people to book a bunch of extra tickets. And those people are hard to hire for us because we only need them temporarily. And so that means there's a limit to how big our program can get. But if there was an AI, and in fact, ChatGPT does this with some plugins, that would allow one person to put in the parameters and enter a spreadsheet with all of our students' destinations in mind. And then ChatGPT could use a Expedia plugin and can buy all those tickets with the push of a button. Well, now all of a sudden, I can scale my program and have lots more students be able to fly and meet students. So I've now exponentially increased my human interactions with people, right? And I can do that without hiring more people. So I can at least maintain my price and perhaps even drop my price for students to be able to do that because of that efficiency. Now, that's an interesting question. Did I eliminate jobs with AI in that second example? Well, I would say no, because we couldn't practically hire those jobs in the first place. There's no scenario where we can hire all those extra people to book those tickets for a temporary situation because of the cost they'd have to pass on. But, can I get more done that would normally have been done by people, but now it's being done by technology? Yes. Well, what's the reason? Well, in this case, I could say, well, I could double, triple, or perhaps even more the amount of students that I can put in a live location where they can talk to their live Ascend team leader, human leaders, and have a much more human experience. And I think that's maybe where we can at least pause in this kind of idea of technology and all those things. I don't know that historically it's possible to put the technology genie back in the bottle, but I think it's absolutely essential to be the kind of people that have the alternative idea of constantly asking, what does the technology allow me to do? And does it allow me to become more or less human? And if the answer is it allows me to become more human, and you have and you need to have a definition of what becoming more human is, then it's technology that will probably move you forward. And if it's technology that makes you less human, then you should probably draw the line. And I might get just a little risky here and say, think about that in terms of your current technology use with or without AI, social media, et cetera. Does your social media habit make you more human or more of a screen staring zombie? And if it does indeed connect you to people and allows you to be more human, yay for social media. And if it makes you more into a screen staring zombie, then maybe it's not technology that's ultimately very good for you and you should spend a little more time outside. And so that may be a good alternative idea for us to rest on as we wrap up this particular episode.
Hey, thank you so much for listening into this clip of the Alternative Ideas podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to see more of them just like it, you can view some other clips like this one and the full episodes right here on the Alternative Ideas YouTube channel.